So welcome to the last of your study committee's information meetings on Act 46. My name is Felicity Rattay, and I am a facilitator for this meeting. I'm not a participant other than explaining to you what the rules of the presentation are, and then helping it move along on its way. So my job is just to describe for you what we're going to do this evening, and undoubtedly, since you're all living in the same town as the people last week, you know what is going to happen, I assume, because you heard from last week essentially what we did. So we're going to, the members of the committee are going to present the information on the Articles of Agreement. Then we're going to pause at each one of those presentations. So the first one is going to be on educational opportunities that the articles offer for school kids. The second one is the financial implications. It's listed there as taxes, but it's financial writ large. And the last one is the timeline in the process. And then at the end of each one of those presentations, we're going to have a period of time for you guys to ask questions and get answers to your questions. And we're going to ask you to write those questions down and post them on the sticky wall for two reasons. One is so we have a written record of the questions, because then they will get put up on the blog site. And the second is to give you an opportunity to get up and move around, because sometimes sitting still is hard, especially here because the heat is over there and not necessarily here. So essentially the process for the meeting is what I just said. So I don't need to say that anymore. And the important thing about this meeting is this meeting really is an information meeting. It's not necessarily a meeting for you to discuss what's going to happen, because the idea is that we really want to give you information so that you can make an informed vote on March 7th. And the goals for the meeting are essentially there for you to understand the Articles of Agreement, understand what the substance of them is, and understand the implications of both a yes and a no vote for Wardsboro, as well as for Dover and for Marlboro, and for Leland and Gray. And we're going to explain why that matters over the course of the meeting. So, and then the other thing is that this is actually the last of the meetings for the Wardsboro community. The first one was last week. But there will be two more, one on the 13th of February in Marlboro, and one on the 27th of February in Dover. If somebody really desperately wants to come to one of these meetings, basically the content is the same, just the venue changes. So, Selena, you're up.
All right. Hello, I'm Selena Romo. I am a school board member in Marlboro, as well as a parent and a member of this study committee. I think we'll just do some quick introductions for those of you who don't know who the rest of the board members are.
Jill Dean from Wardsboro.
Mike Murphy from Wardsboro.
Randy Capitani from Dover.
Dwight Boron here in Wardsboro.
And there's a few other members that couldn't be here tonight. Dan MacArthur is also a board member from Marlboro. He might be rolling in here in a little bit. I know that I heard a rumor he was coming over. Lucy Gratwick is a community member from Marlboro who is also a member of the study committee. Rich Warner is our committee chair. He's from Dover. Laura Sibilia from Dover. And Chip Vickery, also from Dover. Thank you. That's us working really hard. So we had lots of conversations. We've been working together since the summer, drafting all of these things. And one of the so many conversations were focused on all of our schools are so very different. How are we going to make this work? How are we going to make this about the kids? So we decided that we needed a vision statement to be able to guide all of our conversations around that. So this was the vision statement that we came up with that is also at the beginning of our Articles of Agreement. So with respect for each town's local identity, we envision a unified school district that will represent how the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. By sharing resources and talents, we believe this alliance can provide students and teachers access to increased educational opportunities and improved services. So this was kind of our overarching idea that we tried to tackle all of the various boxes we had to tick for the articles for the state to approve. So we also worked with John Everett, who was our state assigned consultant. He is the former head of the Vermont School Boards Association. He had a lot of knowledge and connections at the state level, so we were able to bounce lots of ideas off of him and also get information back pretty readily, which was fantastic. And I have to say, probably the biggest thing for me from working with these guys for 6 months is we have developed a really deep respect for each other and each other's communities, and how the state had a really big ask of us. And we've done our due diligence, and I think we feel pretty good about what we've come up with. So I guess from there, the next slide is oh, there's lots of excellent bedside reading too, if you like. All of our information, everything that we've done, all of the resources that we looked into, is all housed on the blog site that Anita has been amazingly taking care of for us. All of the questions from the previous meetings have answers to them and are also on the blog site. The actual articles of agreement are on the blog site for your reading pleasure. And yeah, I guess that's, oh, and also all the BCTV has videotaped all of our meetings from the very beginning, from when we started working over the summer. So if you really want to have some awesome TV watching experience, you can watch all of those meetings as well. And the links to those are also on the blog site. And from there, I'm actually going to turn it on over to Dwight to tackle one of our biggest questions that we had to answer.
Right. Educational opportunities. The legislature in their infinite wisdom has told us that this Act 46 will create additional opportunities for students. And it's something the committee took very seriously. We basically took that on from every aspect of what we talked about. That was always in the back of our mind. What are the additional opportunities that we can provide to children? Now, the problem though is that we can't be very specific in what we're trying to state for those opportunities. But what we needed to do was create essentially a blueprint for the following board to follow through with to put those opportunities into place. And we did that, and one of the ways that was right off the bat in our article of agreement, which I've read over and over. I'm going to read it again now. Article 1 of the article of agreement states, the unified board, which will be the new board coming in, will act in the best interest of its students. In order to maximize the opportunities available to all students, the unified board will allow for educational opportunities provided at each school to be extended to all students in the district. In addition, the board will seek opportunities for schools to share resources, educational programs, materials, and faculty expertise. The unified board will work towards enhancing educational opportunities that may become available for the benefit of all students in the district, including expanding curriculum, maximizing available technology, and introducing learning procedures or educational programs. The board will ensure that these opportunities are made available to all students in the district. So basically it's telling the incoming board it needs to do everything it can to provide all opportunities throughout the entire district. So what are some of the ways it can do that? One would be establishing elementary school choice. What that does is it allows for students in one school to attend another school in the district. Now, we can't have, the incoming board will be able to set restrictions to that. We can't have all the students going to one school or another. It's within their right to refuse or to set up limits to how that works. So that is what they'll have that ability to make those choices for students who want to attend different schools for whatever reason that might be. Organized sharing programs. Basically, what you're saying here is if a program is available in one school, it should be available at another. An example we found, what Selena was talking about, was our schools are all a little bit different. They offer different programs. We learned, for example, that Marlboro and Dover both offer Spanish in elementary, and Wardsboro does not. Now, if someone from Wardsboro would go to the board and say, we should have that here as well, the board needs to do everything in their power to make sure that happens. A single teacher agreement. What that would mean would be that teachers will no longer be working just for this single school, they'll be working for the district. So when a teacher applies, they'll be applying to the district, not to that school. Retaining and attracting quality teachers. The idea there is that it's a larger pool to attract by the one district. Maintaining secondary choice. As you all know, Wardsboro is K through 6 with 7 through 12 choice, as is Dover. Wardsboro has a little, Marlboro has a little bit more at stake there because they have a 7th and 8th grade. In order to join our group, they have to not have 7th and 8th grade, and that's something they're wrestling with now. And also, getting back to secondary choice, there'll be one policy. Right now, Dover's policy is to give to be a sending school, sending town for burn burden, whereas Wardsboro gives the town average, or the statewide average. So it would be one policy that would be voted on by the entire district. Shared substitute teacher pool, pretty much goes without saying, and shared special education costs. So that, what that is if a town won't have the burden of those special education costs, because it'll be, the cost will be spread over the entire district. Okay? Or the drawbacks, consequence of communication not aligned with the goals of Act 46. Potential inequalities of access due to transportation. So what we're saying there is, if a family may have the ability to transport their child to a different school, where some families may not have access, that creates some inequalities. We just talked about the closure of Marlboro's junior high. The 7th and 8th grade programs will have choice rather than their own school. And potential shift in choice for Dover tuition payments. Right, that's what we talked about a minute ago too as well. Right? Yeah, good.
Okay, so these presentations go a lot faster than we planned. Plenty of time to think about your questions, and we have color-coded paper with the idea that it goes with the education questions. But you don't have to do that if you don't want to. And we will pennies as well. So please, as I said, write your questions down. Feel free to post them on the wall or hand them to me, and I will post them to the wall.
Did you explain the colors?
And I did. I said blue is education. We are going to be talking about finances and the timeline, and the timeline includes the issue of what happens with the yes vote and what happens with the no vote. So if your questions are directed to that, you can hold them for the next one. Ready? So don't we share resources through the WCSU, I presumably already? Question mark?
We do share some resources currently. I'm not sure how much. Tammy actually might be able to speak to that. Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah.
But I think Wardsboro utilizes some of the central offices staff more so than the other schools do.
Correct. We have a PE teacher who's shared throughout the district. We also have a librarian/art teacher who's shared throughout the district. Our music teacher teaches at Leland and Gray as well, and our special educator is split between Wardsboro and Dover currently. Did I miss anybody, Laura? Yeah. As far as staffing goes, there's other, we use the business office as well currently to do the budgeting
Right, so there will be some crossover there. I mean, we do some care resources currently. That's true.
Okay, the next question is, will school choice options change, i.e. will a specific school be recognized for our sending school, i.e. Burton or Leland and Gray, Twin Valley, or all of the above?
Right, let me answer that, because maybe I didn't explain it well enough. So there'll be one policy for the whole district. And that, just like we vote on it each year at town meeting on an article, what the policy would be. I think I'm getting this question right. For be a sending school. So the whole district will need to vote on that, and it would be the total, not each town will vote on it, but the total electorate from all 3 towns would vote on that policy. So the board would set it, if I get this right, and then it would be voted on by the electorate.
Well, I think, can I clarify?
Yeah, can I add to that a little?
Yeah.
So I think, too, the only way that would happen would be if the voters in the district decided they wanted to align with one particular school. That's really what the question is getting at.
Yes.
Yeah. And the way Act 46 is currently structured, it does not force any of the merged districts to choose between choice or non-choice. So as long as the 3 towns, assuming all 3 towns are into this new district, as long as the 3 towns continued to support school choice would continue to be the rule for these particular towns. That's why we're doing the side-by-side, and that's why the Leland and Gray towns, which are Jamaica, Newfane, Townsend, et cetera, are looking at a K through 12 unified district, because they are already committed to sending their kids to Leland and Gray, so that won't change. What will change is they won't have 6 school boards plus a supervisory board trying to run the Leland and Gray district. It'll be 1 board running, 4 elementary schools plus a high school and a middle school? More or less, maybe 5 schools. I don't know how many are over there anymore. 4, I guess. So, does that answer the question a little better?
Yeah, the term sending school is a little that's not really the right terminology because we're all school choice, so it's maintaining choice all around. What Dover currently does is they pay more than, the state gives us a flat dollar amount, says if you're gonna be a choice town, you have to pay, it's like $14,500 something for choice, tuition to the school. Dover says we're gonna pay up to what the tuition is for Burton. So every year at their town meeting, they have a special vote that says we're gonna vote extra for that. That's where the confusion is a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's also one of the questions that would come up with a new board and a policy they'd have to make, is if they're gonna continue to offer that for Dover, or if we're all gonna have to be paying the state of it.
Well, and that would go to the voters. And as someone who sends a kid to a school other than Burton, having that extra $750 or $1,025, I forget what the difference is right now, is a nice thing to have. So it's helpful for what that's worth.
Unless it's a state, the only other thing I would add is we have, if it's a state, if it's a
Public school.
public school, excuse me. If it's a public school, then the town has to pay that tuition no matter what it is. Like, I think Brattleboro has a higher tuition rate than the state average.
It does.
Right.
Yeah, so if Brattleboro is $19,000, the town would, or the district would pay that, just as they would now. That's the state law requires it.
At no cost to the families.
Right.
No cost to the family.
So we're good on that one? Any follow-ups? All right, how does this affect sending to private schools in 7 through 12?
It won't.
It won't, I think.
It won't. However it works now in your town, particularly Wardsboro, it will stay the same, because you guys are a K through 6 district. Marlboro, as Dwight mentioned, has the tough decision to make, because to join this district, they'll have to give up their 7th and 8th grade. And that's, would you say that's going down smooth, Lauren?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, so it's going to be a tough choice for
We don't need to get into
Marlboro.
that issue.
No, we don't, but it is something that is going to affect the outcome of this vote, for sure.
Yeah. So here's a connected question. If a student is denied choice, what happens?
They
Can't be denied. And the state can't require us to give up choice as well.
Was that,
Does that-
speaking to the elementary?
I think it's
Oh,
probably the
elementary.
3
Oh, I'm
elementary.
sorry, elementary.
Yeah.
It was my question, but I'm assuming that's.
No,
what
okay.
So the idea would be if a student says, from Wardsboro, says, I want to go to Marlboro, and the board says no, what happens?
Well, that's really up to the board. So the board has to take that into consideration. If there's extenuating circumstances, it's not up to us, or it's not in the articles, but the board must address that and then make the decision. So it gives the board authority to either accept or deny a movement of a student.
So here's a connected question. If the program isn't offered at one of the schools and can't be offered by that school, would the student be allowed to go to the other school just for that program?
Possible.
That was the idea behind the choice. It was hard for us to get too specific about how that would work, because we are not the organizing board for the new school district. We are simply a study committee that had to look at the possibilities of this working. And we had to do that to satisfy the Act 46 requirements. We cannot be the board or the group that writes policy for a new school district. There will be a board that will be voted on at town meeting. At the same time, you're voting yay or nay on this whole thing, and if the merger goes through and the board goes through, then that board will set the actual policy. But they will be encouraged, I can tell you, to be as liberal as they can with the choice policy. That was the intent of this committee. But we felt we couldn't write specific language into the articles.
So connected to that, will busing be provided between the 3 towns for elementary students?
That's, transportation's been a really big, it's come up in every single conversation we have because, you know, for lack of a better term, you can't get there from here very easily. But again, we're the foundation layers. We're not, the transportation policy needs to be implemented by the new board. And it's definitely something that is a hot ticket item and, you know, will be thought out very, by the new entity, but if it goes through, so. I don't know if that's answering the question. I really don't know.
Yeah, the answer is that to keep pushing it off onto the next board, but that's
Yeah.
the answer. The answer is that board will have to take into consideration the expense and whether or not that's something they want to take on or if they don't.
I think if I were on that board, and again, I'm only speaking for myself, and transportation became an issue, whether it was a bus from here to Marlboro or a secondary bus to Burton, I think a prudent board would give voters an option in the first year as an article to support that, yay or nay, and let the voters of the district decide whether they wanted to do that and absorb that cost. If they did, then there would be busing. If not, if that went down, then there wouldn't be. But again, that's only my opinion on how it would work. I'm not sure
But it would
what
have to
it
be
would
for
work.
all three schools, the same
Right.
policy.
Yeah, it would be for the district. So there would be a consistent policy between the schools. So there would be buses back and forth between Wardsboro and Marlboro,
So
for example.
the three towns would take on the cost of,
But
the busing.
but the voters would ultimately decide that, just like the voters would ultimately decide the tuition rate for secondary schools. The board would make recommendations, and then it would either be voted on up or down, either in the budget or as a separate article. That's how it would work now, and that's how it would work with the new group.
So, good on educational opportunities. Any last remaining questions? Okey-doke, then on to financial implications / taxes. And who's doing that?
Well, I'm gonna wing it, because Rich isn't here. So bear with me, because I'm the numbers guy. Yeah, I can pick it. So, taxes. John, how long has Act 60 been around?
Since like 96, 7?
97, 20 years this year. So, as you know, tax rates are not necessarily controlled by the local school board. They have a say in it, but there are also other factors. Part of the Act 46 process would be that if you voted this in, whatever new tax rate was established for the unified district, let's say, just for argument's sake, that's $1.50 per $100 evaluation next year. Then the state would offer a subsidized grant for the first year of 8 cents off that rate, 6 cents after that, 4 cents after that, 2 cents after that, and then it would go level in the 5th year. And that is essentially, for lack of a better word, the carrot that the legislature came up with when they wrote Act 46. The bigger issues, if you're not that worried about the tax rate, would be the small school grants. The only way to keep a small school grant is to support this merger. Currently, Wardsboro gets $83,595, Marlboro gets $116,662, and Dover gets $61,11. And those small school grants were established after Act 60 to help ease the impact of the redistribution of property tax money. And I won't go to the history beyond that, because at this point it's not worth it. The state financial assistance will continue with the hold harmless, and I cannot explain that as good as a school board member can. But essentially that's what's known as phantom students. So if you have a declining enrollment in your school, the state takes a 3-year rolling average of your student population, calculates a number of phantom students, or students that used to be in your school but aren't there anymore, and continues to pay you for those students. And that would be, do we know how much that is right now, the payment per student? Any school board member have that number?
Not off the top of my head, but.
17,000, 16,000, somewhere in there. So if you don't do this, that goes away. And then the new district, if it's formed after town meeting, will get a one-time grant up to $150,000 to pay for the cost of the transition, because you'll have, for the next 2 years, assuming this goes through, you would still have your regular Wardsboro school board, plus you'll have a new school board that will be working on the transition, and they'll be working closely with the current school boards. But they won't have any money, because you won't be voting on any money in your town school budget to the new district. So the state gives you that grant money to help you with your costs for the 2 years. Where's all that money coming from? It's coming out of the education fund, so you're all paying for it one way or the other anyway, but at least it's masked a little bit. A standard accounting method would allow direct financial comparisons. I assume that's meant between building and building, right? And there will be shared contracts on certain things for all 3 schools. That could include teacher contracts. In fact, it would include teacher contracts. Trash removal, food service contracts, whatever you want to get down to. The theory being a larger group can negotiate a better price. So in theory, that was one of the cost-saving features of Act 46 when it was introduced. Consequences of not going through with the vote, or voting down, actually.
No, these are the, if it goes through. This is the.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're right. I
Sorry.
read that wrong. First time going through this, so pardon me. These things can happen that are negatives, and we did have to look at negatives too, and we really hashed through a lot of that stuff. I'm not sure this would really happen, but there's a potential for difficulty understanding larger unified budget for taxpayers. We're all used to looking at a school budget in our town report and saying, this is what I'm going to spend for my school. If it's a new district, you will be saying, this is what we're going to spend for our schools. And that's a little different way of looking at it. And so you might see a transportation number that would look extremely large compared to what you had in the past. And that's because you're paying for transportation for 3 schools. But there's also taxpayers in 3 towns who pay for that, not just 1 town. So this is a big one, is finding new ways to engage citizens in school budget discussions. And we wrestled with this quite a bit. Because, at least for the first year, the vote will have to be done by Australian ballot. And the way it's done now is everybody sits down at their town meeting. You have an article in front of you, you look at the numbers, you talk about it, you have a show of hands, or you're passing paper around and you vote on it up or down, right? Nobody does an Australian ballot right now. After the first year, the district may choose to go back to Australian ballot, but it will still be different because you won't be able to sit down here in your town hall town meeting and have a discussion about it unless it's with a joint district meeting. Your individual town meeting will really be just a town meeting at that point, and it won't be a school district meeting. So these are some of the things you would see change with a new district. And of course, unified board meetings could hinder participation. I would, again, speaking only from my own ideas of how it would work, I would think you'd see rolling board meetings where 1 week it would be here, 1 week it would be in Dover, 1 week it would be in Marlboro. If you really want to see a good example, well, let me just say, if you want to see an example of how this could work, look at Wilmington and Whitingham and what they've done with the Twin Valley District. They're 10 years ahead of the curve, and you can see both good and bad on how that's worked out. Both of my kids went through middle school there. They had a good experience with the school. But if you want to look at the government side, that's a good one to look at. Because they do have a unified board, and they do have a unified budget that's voted on by the district, and it gets approved for the most part. And I think people get it. So that's one way. That's a good close example to look at. So that's my 2 cents worth on that. Anything else? You guys got stuff you want to add?
No.
Okay.
So this is green section. Ideally, you'll write your questions on green. Or if you've already written them on blue, I will take blue. Anybody want to read? So is there a projection of tax increase or decrease for towns within the new district, notwithstanding the incentives of the first few years?
Yes. And is this, could you say that again?
Is there a projection of tax increase or decrease for towns within the new district, notwithstanding incentives of the first few years?
It's page 20.
You don't have that?
Well, so.
Projection, not really a projection. All we could do was take current tax numbers and look at what they would be with the unified district, because of course we can't say what a new district is going to spend or not spend money on. And I'm going to shoot these off the top of my head. Wardsboro would save before the incentive. Do we have it? You got it? Thank you. Before I totally. Current tax rate in Wardsboro for the current fiscal year was $1.59. Wardsboro would save 6 cents off of that. With this fiscal year's numbers. Again, we don't know what the new district would be, so we can't project. Marlboro would be the big winner. They would save 20 cents. From $1.73 down to $1.53. Dover would save 4 cents. And then you add the incentives on top of that. What that doesn't take into account would be what the individual towns would lose, which were the numbers we just talked about up there, if you don't approve it. So aside from seeing some good to modest savings, you're also going to lose that revenue on the backside that you're going to have to account for. Again, I don't know what an individual town tax rate would be if 20,000 is a penny on your tax rate or 40,000 is a penny on your tax rate. Wardsboro could be looking at 2 cents extra or 3 cents extra. Again, without knowing how your budget affects your tax rate, it's hard for me to say. So those numbers are on the website in the articles.
It's page 28 of the article.
Page 28 of the article, Selena knows it. We just.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Because I didn't understand what you just said, and I was just curious if maybe everybody else totally understood what you just said. The one complication was that my understanding is the tax rate that was asked would be the tax rate taking away the tax reduction, but everything else being the same. In other words, keeping the small schools grant and the hold harmless.
Those would be the same. Those would be the reduction.
Okay.
Yes. So the only projection I could make would be that Wardsboro is currently paying $1.59. If you voted this down, you're going to lose your small school grant, so your tax rate is going to go up significantly because you're going to lose that $85,000.
Well, what if they voted up?
Well, they're going to have to vote it up to cover the loss of that revenue.
No, not that. What if they vote yes?
Vote to raise.
Then they'll keep that money. The district will keep that money.
That's the number that's there.
So that's the number that's
The
there.
numbers would stay exactly the way they are right now if we merge, but they'll go up if we don't merge.
I'm not saying they'll stay exactly the way they are right now. What I'm saying is you would lose that revenue, so there is no doubt that your tax rate would go up because you're not going to have that revenue. You have to make it up somewhere.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is in terms of savings, and I just want to make sure I understand you, because I can't figure out where that money would come from other than the incentives, just by the 3 towns merging governance. So what we're paying today, 2016 FY, whatever that is $159 in Wardsboro.
Mm-hmm.
If we merge, it remains $159 in Wardsboro, and then on top of that, you get the added savings for a few years of the incentives. Am I understanding that right?
Essentially, yes, but you won't necessarily stay at 159 in Wardsboro because it's going to be a rate set for the cost of the new district.
Right, but based on today's...
Based on today's number, yes, it would essentially stay at...
there's no savings per se in just getting all of us together right off the bat, other than what the state is giving us. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
I think we wrestled with this because we knew we'd do this question tonight. Are your taxes going to go up? And the answer is the projection. And I hated that word from the very beginning because we can't project what's going to happen. Just as Randy said, we don't know what the next school board is going to decide. We do know certain things in Wardsboro, particularly, will be taken away: small school grant and the phantom students, which will affect us. Do we know if we merge, it'll stay the same? Maybe. If we don't merge, we have a good sense that your taxes will go up if we don't merge, because we'll lose those two items, and then the tax incentive for the next 5 years as well. So there's 3 items there that are on the table. So that's kind of what we looked at. But as far as creating a model, it was very difficult to try to figure out what it would be and what it would look like, and it was nearly impossible.
So follow-up question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Here's a thought. Up there it says that the merger grant will support a transition to a unified system for up to $150K. So if the articles of agreement that the committee created are voted down and then after the fact, the state comes back a year later and says, "Scusi, here's your plan, just implement it," they're not gonna give you $150K to do that, are they?
We don't know.
We don't know.
And it could very well be. We also could possibly lose the other items as well. We might lose I don't know. We don't know what it will look like if we vote it down and they come back to us and tell us that we have to merge anyway. We do know that they're required by law to give us these things if we do approve.
Right. That's the stick part. We don't know what's going to happen.
So here is another question. The towns pay WCSU, that's the overarching supervisory union, a lot of dollars now every year. Will that go down if there's only 2 districts here?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know that ever came up in our meetings.
What do we? I know someone from the school might be.
Yeah.
That does us.
You're paying for special ed services, I assume other
I mean, the
things?
assumption, I can't speak specifically to dollar for dollar because I don't know what each individual, I don't know exactly what Wardsboro pays, I don't know exactly what Dover pays. Marlboro doesn't pay a lot to the WCSU, but the assumption is that we go from, Wardsboro we have 80-something students, K through 12?
K through 12. Oh, yeah.
12. Yeah. So you go from, a smaller, even if you're just talking a case of 6, it's 50-something. Marlboro has 79 K-8, and Dover has...
Kids?
Yeah.
I think it's 135 this year.
Yeah. But you're splitting that dollar amount amongst all of those students, not just the 50-whatever kids in Wardsboro. You have a larger pool of kids, so it's 400 kids or whatever, and so that dollar amount that you're having to bill for is being divided amongst all of those students instead of.
Sorry, this is follow-up to what you're just
It's
saying,
okay.
but if we're paying money to the supervisory union right now for sharing of resources, and we are now moving to sharing resources with a smaller group, doesn't that stand to reason that we'll actually be paying more for those resources, not less?
The groups is smaller.
So right now, we at Wardsboro, we pay to the supervisory union for these resources that we
Right.
get. That is between us and all of the schools that are involved in Leland and Gray and a few other schools that share these resources. If we start this new district of just Dover, Marlboro, and Wardsboro, we are now sharing resources between 3 schools. Doesn't that mean the cost of resources is going to go up? Because you're paying for only 3 schools versus paying for, say, 7 schools.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I thank you for clarifying that. That's what you're asking. I don't know because I haven't actually been to many of the Leland and Gray meetings, but they're also going to be using those same services and contracting with WCSU. So, but I don't know what that's going to look like on their side of the merger. So that's a really good question.
Yeah, and all of this is contingent on the other side, the Leland and Gray towns, approving their merger, which is another wild card in this whole thing. And again, that's something we can't predict, and we don't know if it's going to happen or not. I think yours is a really good question. We have had discussions with our group and with the consultant and with the superintendent that the new district, we would assume, would continue to buy or pay for certain services through the supervisory union. Some of that's mandated by law, like transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So you would still have to continue to work with the supervisory union for a lot of those things. Some things the new board might decide would be better off being bought directly. Some things might be better off pooling with the other side of the side-by-side. And again, those are things you just have to work through as you move forward.
I just, off the top of my head, I'm thinking that a few places where there would be savings would be the audits. Instead of having 3 separate town audits, there would be one audit for the one district of all 3 towns.
We have a number.
That saves about $8 grand per.
For the district, it would say $14,000.
Right.
Because I guess it's $7,000 per town right now, so you throw 2 of those out.
Right. So there's one place there would be savings. I think in terms of what you're saying, my gut just tells me that we would probably operate a lot the way we already do. And if there's a music teacher or a librarian or whatever that is already being used throughout the supervisory union, and that's the most sensible way to use that person probably get contracted similarly, just because we're not gonna be different people, we're still the same
Yeah.
community.
And that's a good point, and somebody said that in one of our earlier meetings. It's essentially, it's not like this nebulous board that nobody knows about. It's basically gonna be similar to people who are already on your school boards are gonna be running the new district. People who care, people who are concerned about the school, people who have experience for the most part.
And the only other place that I've been able to find where there might potentially be some reduction in central office expenses is that we're currently paying our superintendent to go to a lot of different school board meetings, and I suspect he gets a per diem or something for his car or something like that. So that would come down because he would only be going to 2 district meetings every month, or maybe twice a month, instead of, he's probably going to meetings 2 or 3 times a day sometimes.
Yeah.
So there would be savings there, but aside from those 2 things, nothing is jumping out as like a huge overall savings. I mean, the state is putting this on us, and you will find your tax rate going up because of the phantom student and the loss of the grant, but that's something that Act 46 put on us. That's not savings we're gaining by this merger necessarily.
Yeah.
So I have another question which connects to this, so I'm going to interject it here, so I'll make sure it gets answered. Other than losing the small school grant money, are there other major financial losses? Presumably that is if it gets voted down.
Well, there's the hold harmless, which is the phantom students. That would be the other major one.
And that's it. So those
Well,
two.
and the 150,000
It's-
gets set up.
That's like four thing. What's it?
the
Tax incentives
the tax.
and the 100.
Well, you would have the grant you wouldn't get for the merger grant,
Right.
but then you wouldn't need it.
You would need it. You would need it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just confused from being at a Leland and Gray board meeting. Don't we lose our phantom students eventually anyways? That's part of this whole thing, is that it doesn't matter whether we combine or not. The state is taking away phantom students. That was a big issue over at Leland and Gray.
That's not our.
It's affecting their budget.
That wasn't our understanding
That's not
of
our
it, with
understanding.
working with our consultant who was the interface with the ed department.
I need to clarify that.
Worth a follow-up.
Our understanding was we could keep.
Yeah,
that.
that's something we'll have to
I
follow
think
up
that's
on.
something that definitely needs to be
Oh,
followed
yeah,
up on,
absolutely.
because Leland and Gray, when I was at their last meeting, that is a huge part of their budget issues right now, is that they will be losing their phantom students, and it's affecting the school hugely.
Well, I think even if you do lose the phantom students, if we combine with the districts, we'll have a larger pool of students. Whereas Wardsboro loses 5 students, that's 10% of their students. Whereas if we have a district of 200 kids and lose, 10 kids, it's a smaller percentage. And the other school, the other towns will have to supplement rather than just Wardsboro supplementing for those lost of students.
Well, the interesting thing too is Dover doesn't have any phantom students. Marlboro has half the phantom students.
We have
None.
We have 0.8,
So less than.
almost a whole, not
Wardsboro,
quite.
Wardsboro has half a dozen or so, I think.
6.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we're the only town with phantom students currently.
That would really be affected by it.
So I'm going to move to, there's another question that's kind of on the process, so I'm going to hold that for the process section. So the last one here is, could a uniform board meetings be held at the same time in each town via video conference to avoid multiple meetings?
Sure.
Sure. Actually, that's a really great suggestion.
Yeah.
As long as you got Wi-Fi at home or
I don't know.
high speed.
I don't know if there's any legal.
There are not.
There are not.
My wife is on the Dover Select Board, and she can Skype into a meeting if she's unavailable. So no, that could all be done remotely. We can keep the video guy going.
Yeah. That's it.
The next question is specifically connected to the $150,000 merger grant based upon whether or not 2 or 3 towns join the group. So why don't you guys go through the process and then you can answer that question. So who's doing the process?
So process, where do we go from here? So the new merged board currently has equal representation because it's all based upon population. So there would be 3 representatives from Wardsboro, 3 representatives from Dover, and 3 representatives from Marlboro. And at town meeting, you will vote for these new school board members. So even if you're voting nay for this merger, I still say vote for a board member, because if it gets voted in, they have work to do. And the assumption is that on March 8th, they can get busy.
You guys want to from the floor for
So the timeline from there is from March 8th until June 30th of 2019. It's 2 years. The board is going to be working on creating policies and procedures, like the transportation thing we were talking about, like the programming things, like creating teacher contracts, like figuring out how the voting process is going to happen. Australian ballot will have to be the first year, but from there on, they can decide if they want to go back to having a floor vote. But that would be up to the new board to decide, as well as townsfolk, to see how that shakes out. Yeah, that's basically it. And then so this kind of breaks things down, what happens if one town votes no and other towns vote yes. So if Marlboro says no and Dover and Wardsboro say yes to the merger, Dover and Wardsboro can move forward with a merged district potentially. They could submit for, it's called an alternative structure proposal through the Agency of Education, and they could say, look, we've done our work, we're ready to get going, please say yes to us, we're fulfilling the requirements of Act 46. Marlboro can submit an alternative structure petition also to the agency to operate as a standalone district, and they would have to do that by November of 2017. Also, they can choose, they have a year, so they have until March 7th of 2018 to decide if we would like to rejoin Dover and Wardsboro. And at that, Dover and Wardsboro can say yes. If we wait until March 8th, then Dover and Wardsboro have to vote us back in to join your dance party. If Dover votes no and Wardsboro and Marlboro vote yes, the merger fails. Part of the reason why there's a differentiation here between Marlboro and Dover and Wardsboro voting yes and no is that there are different requirements for the merger. Dover and Wardsboro are considered necessary for the vote to happen. Marlboro is advisable. And we kept it that way because Marlboro has a larger question to answer around the 7th and 8th grade. So Dover says no. If Dover residents are wanting to, they can have a petition. They can hold a revote with 5% of the population. Same goes for if Wardsboro votes no. They can also hold a revote if they would like to and see if they want to move forward with it. If each town votes no, then again, they can hold a revote depending on how numbers look and whatnot and how things shake out, what the state is saying. And then, as Randy said earlier, there is a whole other side to this, which is the Leland and Gray side. So if Leland and Gray says no, and then our 3 towns say yes, we feel like we have done the due diligence, and we had a lot of conversations with our consultant around this, trying to figure out, like, okay, well, what happens to all this work if we say yes and Leland and Gray says no? We can also petition the Agency of Education to say, look, we've done our work, we've done our due diligence, will you please honor what we're doing? And hopefully they'll say, okay. Is there another slide after this?
I think it's only that things will remain the same. Oh, no, it's not. It's the end.
It's the end. Oh, and just that the current school boards that are currently in operation will still work as they are now for the next 2 years. So there'll be 2 boards working simultaneously. There'll be a merger board as well as the Wardsboro School Board and the Dover School Board and the Marlboro School Board, because they still have 2 years to operate as a single district before it becomes the merged district. That happens on July 1st, 2019.
And Celine, can you just speak to the representation of the boards?
Sure. So it's all figured out. It's all by population. So I can't remember what the population breakdown is right now. But the way that it currently shakes out is each town actually gets an equal representation. There's 3 board members 3 representatives from Marlboro, 3 representatives from Dover, 3 representatives from Wardsboro. When the next 10-year census comes out, that could change depending on what the census says for town populations. But as of right now, we have equal representation.
And there'll always be 6 members if, say, Wardsboro's population goes down and Dover's goes up. And so would they have 3 or 4 members and we would have 2 or?
No, that came up last week, Tammy, and I read through that article again. So the board can Based on the census, the board can reapportion as necessary. So it will not, it does not have to always be 6.
Okay.
But based on the census every 10 years, that'll determine representation, and then the board can say, we've expanded to, 4 times number of students, we now need a 12-member board. So, but that would be, the board would make that choice.
So I think that her question was more along the lines of the census changes and there's more in Dover versus Wardsboro with the if we
Yeah.
stuck potentially with the 6 board, it would be 2
And
to
4.
4
It would be
versus
based on
equal
population.
representation.
Yes. Yep, it could be no longer equal.
So can somebody speak to the question of the merger grant? Is that money based upon 2 or 3 towns merging? In other words, does the money go up or down based upon if it's only 2 towns versus 3 towns? I think that's-
The 150,000 is, so the legislation says up to $150,000. It's going to depend on the number of schools merging, it's going to depend on the number of the student population. That's how the number,
So that's a statewide 150, like all,
Up
like
to,
if there were
yeah.
10 towns merging, they also could get
up to,
Up
yeah,
to.
exactly.
So it could be significantly less potentially.
Yeah, we have no idea what it will actually be.
We did have a grant for this committee, and what was it, up to 20,000?
Mm-hmm.
And basically that was run through the supervisory union, so our vendors just submitted their bills and we assume they got paid out of whatever state grant money they got, or they're waiting to get paid, however that may work out. So I would assume that would work in a similar fashion. So if the new board needed whatever, letterhead, they would get it done, submit the bill to the supervisory union, that would get reimbursed by the state grant fund.
So this is how much you're spending basically.
Yeah.
Spending.
So that board should spend a lot of money.
I have one question that was on process that was given earlier, but if people have questions on process, can I give you paper to write them on? No paper for process. So this question was already submitted, so I'm just going to take asking it. On March 7th, will there be someone at town meeting to talk about the articles if people have more questions?
Wardsboro
I'll be
does.
there. So, yeah.
I'm not sure if that's legal.
I just said I'll
You
be there.
can't change it. I think you,
I'd have to.
an Australian ballot going on at the same time.
We researched that.
Yeah,
Yes,
actually,
we
it
did.
is, we can, sorry, go ahead,
you can't change anything, but you can discuss it.
You can discuss it, you can't, yeah, Lucy's right, you can't vote on any changes.
Can't discuss the ballot though, is that correct?
You can.
What you can't discuss at a town meeting is candidates.
Candidates.
You can discuss votes on budgets.
On budgets, you said?
Well, yes, so you can discuss there, I know in Dover, there's an article that warns for a discussion concerning the vote on the new district. So we will have discussion at our town meeting in Dover about this. We can't modify anything, we can't change any numbers in it, obviously, because you're voting by Australian ballot, but it's essentially an information discussion you can have.
So does that answer that question?
I'm having trouble writing it down because I can't figure out how to
Please,
word
go
it.
ahead.
So my question is right now is, it seems to me that there's an extremely high expectation of your due diligence by the state with very little feedback as to what the potential is based on whatever the scenarios are. I mean, we may get 150K, we may get 20,000, but there's no, it seems insane to me that there's no consideration of any sort of legal representation for these towns that are being forced to merge into these boards where we have absolutely no standing whatsoever telling us what we're actually going to receive depending on what we do. They're not giving us a clear path as to, okay, if you say no, these are the effects. If you say yes, these are the effects. They're just saying, well, we could, but we might and we might not. And this seems a little, I feel like the state is not doing their due diligence on the expectations of Act 46.
You have hit the nail right on the head. And that's one of the frustrating things about going through this process. And I wish there were better answers. There are some other answers that we can give you. One is, if this is voted down, The state will have the right under the law to come in and force mergers without any of those benefits, and you'll still lose all the money. That is written in the law. There is an opportunity to present to the state an alternative structure, which may indeed prevent that, but no one knows how that's going to go. The state has not approved any alternative structures yet. They probably won't for another year or two. So it's a crapshoot. I'm not a big fan of Act 46.
I don't think anybody is. I
No,
don't understand why.
Absolutely not.
It seems to me that the small towns, both south and north, or the smaller population areas, both now north and south, should be working together to create some alternative opportunities, or to even say to the state that this is, you're creating an opportunity that only benefits certain areas and it needs to be revisited. I mean, quite frankly, I don't see how the way that they're doing this can actually be legal.
You can do that. You can go to the state and say that, and the best way to say that would be to vote this down. I'm not encouraging you to do that because you're putting yourself out in the
But that's the point, is they've said to you, you will do this. We're not going to tell you what we may or may not do to you, but you don't have a choice in the matter. I mean, we've lost our whole
It's true.
point of representation at this point.
They're putting a gun to our heads and saying.
I mean, it's already benefited places like Burlington, where they've already done all their merges, they've already gotten all their initial incentives that we've already missed out on. It's kind of ludicrous.
Yeah, I mean, I like to say this is a law that was written for Addison County.
Yeah.
Because that is a place where it will work probably pretty well, actually. But you have relatively flat roads where schools are within 15 minutes apart. Makes a big difference. And they're paved. So you can get from Orwell to Middlebury pretty quickly. To get from here to Marlboro, how long did it take you guys?
55 minutes.
And I'm aware that the Northern Kingdom is having the same issue.
Very much so.
They are.
And
up around Peachum, there are a lot of areas that are having trouble.
it's unfortunate. And the other interesting thing that I found since getting involved with this is we are part two of what Windham Central has gone through to get to this point. The Windham Central board spent, how many meetings did you go to and photograph over there? They spent what, half a year or a year getting to this point to decide which direction to go, and that's how they came up with the side-by-side. And now we've been working since July of last year, so we're going on 7 months, and this process ain't done at all. It's not even close to being done.
And there's no discussion anywhere of these outer areas looking into.
There is plenty of discussion. That was not our charge. And we decided early on, our charge was to look at Act 46 and decide whether these 3 towns could be part of a merger as a bigger merger in a side-by-side. That was our charge. You want to talk after this meeting? I can give you plenty of my own personal thoughts. And if you read any editorials I wrote, you can see them there too.
And where can those editorials be found?
Deerfield Valley News?
Are there other specific questions related to the Articles of Agreement that people have burning?
Yeah, when you spoke, you said after the vote, if it passed, then you said the state would still have to say yes, or is it done if it passes?
Oh, no, the state has already agreed to our Articles of Agreement.
They approved,
We're
The state board approved them on December 20th.
So if it passes the town meetings, it passes.
It's a done deal.
Except for Leland and Gray.
Leland and Gray,
Right.
This
Well-
is the necessary K-12
They are
side.
side by side.
I would assume as in any vote, there is still a 30-day reconsideration period. So you could petition for a revote,
Right.
because that's due process under state law.
And the other complication, because you know how much I love this act myself. The other complication is what's happening right now up in Montpelier. The governor is talking about pushing back the vote on the budget until May, and their committees are talking about changing Act 46.
And that doesn't appear, the pushback doesn't appear to be going very far.
Yeah.
I mean, weren't you part of the group that went up last week?
Well, we weren't part of that budget, no. We went up, 3 of us from Marlboro went up to testify on 2 bills in the House and a bill in the Senate that have to do with delaying timelines, and one specifically about getting clarification under alternative structure, because it's still draft and it's long and onerous, and things like geographic isolation are not, even
Considered.
well, no, they just haven't defined what it is, and yet we're,
So how were you received up there?
So, the House, I thought, was really receptive and listened well and asked really great questions. There was a representative from Bennington named Miller, who none of us knew personally, and she testified on our behalf, practically saying how she often drove from Bennington to Brattleboro, and we had said the road was dangerous. She said, it's not dangerous, it's treacherous. It's like, wow, thank you. You know, the Senate was a little bit different. Senator Baruth is from Chittenden, and Chittenden has had a tremendous success, according to the 3 representatives that were there following us, with getting incentives for merging, and they're on their 3rd year of budget under Act 46. However, they went through a whole list of all their great savings, and given their 2,600 students, it worked out to about $115 per student savings. And they also said there was absolutely nothing that helped them with student outcomes. There was no benefit under Act 46 for addressing the opiate addiction issues that they're dealing with up there. There was nothing under Act 46 that was helping them address a rising number of students being identified under special needs. So the state has, given a lot of money to merge governance at, I think, the expense of some real issues in our state, and we're all dealing with it in our own way. It's frustrating for everybody, obviously, in this room.
Yeah. It's a one-size solution that doesn't.
But I do think testifying is a good thing. It's, we're really lucky in this state that we get an opportunity to do that. Emily set it up for us, and they do listen, and I do think that because we're such a small state, we do have an opportunity to have our cases heard.
So are there other questions specific to the Articles of Agreement? Yes, sir.
Send the question, this is a statement.
A statement, okay?
This whole deal is method of taking away local control, making it a bigger business, which I found not to work, and taking away our democracy and local control.
You should talk to the camera.
Yeah, not her. You want to be on film.
Tell them to TV land.
What about buildings? I heard no mention here about physical properties. What happens to those?
They'll become part of they will be owned by the new district.
So the Wardsboro School will be owned by the new district?
They will be jointly owned by the new district. Yeah, it's funny. As we went through this process, I said this is kind of like putting a real estate deal together backwards. Because we wrote the purchase and sale agreement first, which is the Articles of Agreement, and now we're out selling it to you guys who are the potential buyers of the property. It's kind of a funny way to look at it, but it's my way my mind works sometimes.
Okay, well, if there are no further questions, all of the answers that you heard here were going to be up on the blog as soon as somebody gets around to doing them, and that's all. Thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you. Thank you,
If anybody has a question after the fact, you can just go to the blog homepage. There's a little box that says, I have a question. Just click on that and that'll come to me, and I'll get it to the right person for an answer. So if you wake up at 2 o'clock this morning and have a question, log in and we'll get an answer.
Call you at home.